Hi, my name is AJ Casamento, and I work at Brocade Storage Networking Division of Broadcom. And I'm joined today by my good friend and colleague, Marcus Thordal. How are you, Marcus?
I'm doing well, AJ. Good to be here with you.
And it's always a pleasure, sir. Always a pleasure. So today, Marcus, I want to have a conversation with you about the idea that the things you can't see matter in IT, right? And so one of the first points that I wanted to sort of kick you off with is this concept of the need for a solid foundation, right? The need for a platform from which you can work, right? And maybe you could tell us a little bit about your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think our perspective is always on the infrastructure, right? And the availability of the infrastructure and how, having a solid infrastructure is really the foundation. It's what you depend on when you look at it from delivering IT services. And, we notice it in our own lives, right? On my way here, I went to the cafeteria. I was going to pay for my lunch, and all of a sudden, the payment system was not working properly. And while it, of course, was a little bit stressful and nuisance to me, there was like, before we were done, and it took like a couple of minutes, there was a line of maybe 30 people behind me. Uh, I think they were pretty bothered by having to wait, right? And the other side of that is, of course, for me, it was just a single person impact. But if you look at it from the company that provides the credit card, right? If they're not available for a couple of minutes, well, then they're losing millions of dollars because people will just take another credit card and use that instead once they've tried a couple of times and it doesn't work. And so uh, I think this is where the having the solid foundation always available and that you depend on is really important. In our personal lives, we see it every day or often whenever the foundation that we depend on is all of a sudden not available. Just like you always like to mention, if you don't have availability of water in your house or power cuts off, then you immediately realize that you turn on the tap 10 times an hour, or you use power here and there and everywhere. And so we see it in our personal lives, but it's even more important for, of course, critical services like emergency services, 911. We had an example up in San Francisco where I think it was down for like 8 hours. A million people city, you can't call for emergency. That obviously will have some consequences, as well as in the healthcare space. It's the same thing. If a hospital, if the IT infrastructure is not available, there are so many things that stops.
One of the things that I suggest to customers as we're talking about this stuff is tell me in the last 72 hours what you've done that didn't touch IT or get touched by IT, right? And it's a vanishingly small percentage of your life anymore that doesn't. And to your point, Marcus, we don't think about it, right? Nobody thinks about IT infrastructure until it doesn't work. We don't think about tap and pay, for example, unless tap and pay doesn't work, right? Or if the credit card system is offline, does anybody have cash? Who's walking around with pockets full of cash any longer, right? So that whole scenario, but as well, we were talking about critical services and 911 services and healthcare. The whole healthcare system is now electronic medical records, right? And so when you're looking at that, it matters to people. If you have a drugstore chain, a pharmacy chain that goes offline because of a ransomware attack, how do people get their prescriptions? Right? And it can be more than just the monetary issue. It can be more than just the reputational issue. It can be life-threatening, right? I mean, taking your insulin's not an option. So if you can't get to someplace that knows your prescription or knows the medication and the dosage you're supposed to get and all the rest of it, that's a problem, right? And so there's both the immediate impact of it as well as the longer term impacts of it. And I think that situation continues to be one where the IT infrastructure people, are in a situation where their very best day is when nobody remembers they're there. Because to your point on the water in the house, right? You don't think about it. I don't think about when I go to turn on the tap to get a drink of water, or I go to take a shower, or I go to wash my hands. I don't think about any of that stuff until I turn the tap and nothing happens. And then I think about it a whole bunch, right? And that's the same thing if there's a power outage or anything else. And so the things that you don't see in those environments matter. The infrastructure underneath it matters, right? That solid foundation becomes critical to the concept of continuous operation. And so I'll throw this sort of back over the fence to you in the space that we live in, for Brocade and for the Fibre Channel Storage Area Network space, right? The kinds of customers we deal with, right? That level of uptime and availability, you would agree is part and parcel of the necessary items that we have to have for them.
Oh yeah, it's cardinal in all their businesses. And really it comes down to, we often talk about that it's the data that's the lifeblood of the organization or the company. But if you don't have access to the data, it doesn't really matter how good your data is. And you need, of course, continuous access to that data at you know at scale, at high performance, and so on and so forth. And so what we really look at doing when we design the products around storage networking from Brocade, it is making sure that we can deliver that data back to the applications in a completely reliable manner, even if there are devices on the network that may not behave in the best way, or you could have performance mismatch between the devices, which is very common as you have generations of different devices on the same network, and so on and so forth. So we design into the product the ability to identify that, to inform about that with the monitoring and alerting, and then also to mitigate automatically with things like oversubscription flows and moving them to separate buffer allocation so they don't impact all the others, like the analogy where everybody else in the cafeteria stands behind you and just have to wait. In that case, they would just be moved over to a new teller and they would be able to all pass through. Nobody would have been impacted. And so we can do a lot of these, how do you say, reactive issue resolution in the network with Brocade Fabrics, but we also do a lot of proactive stuff. So we characterize traffic of the same type, put that in separate, again, buffer allocations or separate queues or lanes, how you want to describe it. We call it traffic optimizer. And it works really well. It actually means that often you don't need to do anything reactive when you have traffic optimizer in there. And so there are many areas where we really do this again and again.
I think one of my favorites is Traffic Optimizer, and I say that because every customer we deal with has a mix of technologies on the floor. There's no way they wouldn't, right? Because they don't get to throw away everything every year and start out fresh. And even if they could, even if I gave them the unlimited budget to do that, nobody would re-platform 100% of their mission critical, business critical applications in a 12-month period, because that would lead to excitement and adventure, which are not things that the IT infrastructure people are looking for, right? They like to have stuff just work, right, without anybody noticing what's going on with that. But the challenge with that, when you've got a mix of technologies on the floor, is you end up with the AJ as the grandfather in the family car, versus Marcus in the performance automobile, right? And how do we handle that mismatch? And Traffic Optimizer allows us to do that in a very automated fashion, right? And people don't have to configure it, right? It's just something that we do because of the way Fibre Channel is structured. And I think that kind of scenario where we just do things under the covers that nobody knows about, that just continues to make this stuff run smoothly, right? That matters to people, right? There's that calm that you get from knowing that you can just stand this infrastructure up, you can just run it, and it's just going to sit there and keep clicking along, without having to be babied constantly. That matters to people, right? I think that the point you make on mitigation and resolution is solid as well, because there are going to be times when devices misbehave, right? There are going to be faulty devices or noisy devices. We've got the ability to see, for example, sick but not dead links because sometimes hardware doesn't fail completely. And those intermittent problems, I think you would agree, are occasionally the cause of some amount of gray hair in IT infrastructure. Yes?
Hardest to find for sure. Um, because again, if you have something that doesn't behave the same way over time, but has this intermittent behavior, it's extremely hard to root cause and pinpoint. And as you mentioned, now we've built into the platform so we can detect those and actually communicate to the devices that use the network, hey, we can see that this path is sick but not dead, either because there is something with the cabling or with the optical transceivers that are using that connection. And now the devices can stop using that path and you can take care of it in a standard schedule maintenance window to fix that instead of having an actual application performance impact or in worst case an outage. So yes, having the ability to detect these intermittent issues is extremely important.
And recover from them gracefully, right? I think that's your point about notifying the software and having it step away from the problematic path, right? We've seen that with any number of customers where that's a challenge for people, right? That's something that's difficult to spot, right? And so also being able to determine, as you have with some of your software analytics, failures that are about to happen, right?
Yeah, so what we've done, AJ, is that uh, over the last couple of years, we've actually collected metrics from optical transceivers, and then we run an AI-based machine learning algorithm on those. So we now can detect the pattern for when a optical transceiver will basically burn out at some point. And so that means we can detect it now with very high certainty long before it actually becomes a problem in the infrastructure. And so we can create a replacement case for the customer automatically and then send out a replacement SFP, and they can again schedule it in a normal standard maintenance window without having any performance impacts or disruptions prior to basically decommissioning that link and then replacing it. And you're really, the result of this is that you have minimal or no impact on your operations.
So Marcus, another topic that we definitely need to come back to is the concept of security, right? And as I said earlier on, this is not going to be a pretty conversation anytime soon. And I think it's a challenge as well because the number of bad actors in the world is continuing to rise, right? The sheer volume of attacks. And I know that I'm about to make an unfair comparison, but the attack surface of the Ethernet world or the IP world is orders and orders of magnitude higher than the attack surface or larger than the attack surface of Fibre Channel. And part of that is going to happen just because the Internet of Things is out there and all of those are potential attack surface. But that said, it's not like we're just ignoring that whole situation and we're depending on the fact that Fibre Channel has never been hacked, right? You guys and the software teams and the hardware teams have been working to drive security as a program for us for a very long period of time.
It's truly an integral part of how we design the platform, right? Both from a hardware and a software perspective. It is built based on the principle of secure by design, which is truly an industry standard for how you build IT products. And it comes down to, full validation of the hardware, silicon root of trust, through the software, through signatures of every component within our operating system. And so that gives you basically, again, a very strong foundation. And then on top of that, we then built with security features. And as you know, it can get kind of complicated with all these security features. And to make that easy for the end user to configure and set up, we have this concept of called default secure, which means that you really have an easy button to set the platform so it has all the best practice security configurations. And so again, We're trying to make it, as secure as possible and at the same time operationally easy to use. But if you also look at inherently how Fibre Channel works and the provisioning model, it's again very different than a network built for any-to-any connectivity, like in the Ethernet world or the Internet of Things. On a Fibre Channel network, only devices that are meant to talk to each other through zoning are able to actually connect to each other. And you're not able to sniff on the network and thereby get information about where all the other devices are, or even connect to them is not possible on a zoned network. And so as a result of that, I know you said it was an unfair comparison with the number of attack surfaces on the Internet of Things and so on and so forth, but still, on a Fibre Channel network, if you have a device that is compromised, you cannot launch an attack to others through the Fibre Channel network. You can really only from there attack what that device is zoned to, and that's it. Then the party stops, right? You can't expand from there. And so fundamentally, there's a huge difference in the way the Fibre Channel network is designed compared to an Ethernet or a TCP network.
So I think we can all agree that security issue is something that's not going to go away, as we talked about earlier, and it's just going to continue to be a consistent issue for us because the number of bad actors continues to scale in those environments. And I think the work that you folks have done in engineering, both hardware and software, and your teams has been really, really critical to us being able to provide that best and most secure infrastructures for the IT world. So I really appreciate your time today, Marcus. It's always fun to chat with you about these items. It's good to get your perspective on these things. And I want to thank the folks that were watching this as well for their time today. And in a minute, you're going to see a link you can follow if you want to have more information about this topic. Thank you again.